Radhe Devi Satyavachai Namo Namaha. Vrindai Hai Tulsi Vyai Priyai Kesavasya Cha Vishnu Mati Prade Devi Satyavachai Namo Namaha. Jai Tulsi Maharani, Tulsi Maharani. Okay, time for class. I need the cartels.
Need the cartels.
Where did the cartels go? Good to see everybody. Oh, a lot of people. Okay, so as we mentioned yesterday, and as we did yesterday, we're doing the Caitanya Caritamrta reading and commentary as this class, since it's pretty much similar to this time that we were doing it before. It's only a half-hour difference.
Right.
So we got people all around the world watching, hopefully. Yeah. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunya Bihari.
Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari.
Jaya Radha Madhava Kunya Bihari. Malaba Girivarudade Gopijana Balladaba Girivarudade Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Paravidakacharya Osatara Sitashi Shimad, His Divine Grace Abhaya Charanada Bhaktivedanta Goswami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Anantakoti Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Jai, Namacharya Srila Hridas Thakur Ki Jai, Parem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shidwaita Gadadha Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopi Gopinath Shyam Kunda Radhakunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai, Vrindavanam Ki Jai, Mathuradam Ki Jai, Jagadasami Ki Jai, Yamunamai Kajai, Shrimati Lasi Devi Kajai, Samaveda Bhakta Vrindi Kajai. Gaur Premananda Hari Haribo. All glorious to the assembled devotees, all glorious to the assembled devotees, all glorious to the assembled devotees. All glorious to Shri Guru and Gauranga Shila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Pastaya Bhutale. Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swamini Namani Namaste Saraswati Devi. Gauravani Pacharani Nivashesha Shunyavadi Paschati Dejatarani. So Om Gana Tumadanda Shah Gananjana Shlakaya Chakshur and Mridikam Gena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So we're reading from the 4th chapter of the Antya Lila of the Sri Caitanya Caritamrta Antya. We're reading about a very interesting subject matter, Sanatana Goswami's interactions with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And just to reiterate what we read yesterday, is that Sanatana Goswami had left Vrindavan to go to see Lord Chaitanya in Jagannath Puri, and on the way there he had to go through the Jharkhand forest, which is in Bihar. Most of the devotees from Fiji come from Bihar, from the Jharkhand forest. Most of the Biharis. And also very famous devotee Jarasandha came from there. So maybe some of you were descendants
Probably. Explains a lot.
of Jarasandha. Because Jarasandha had a son, his son was Sadev, and he actually had children, so there may be some genetic connection. So anyway, so he went through the Jharkhand forest, and through the Jharkhand forest he didn't have enough to eat, and the water was quite polluted. So he developed all these sores, eczema or something, whatever you call it, but the sores had pus and everything coming out of them. And he thought, this is crazy. I can't even go close to the Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. I can't go into the temple because of the sores, and also because I worked for the Muslims before. So my life is useless. So he thought, let me just commit suicide by going under the cart of Lord Jagannath, the wheel of the cart. Cart, yeah. Lord Jagannath's cart, the Rath Yatra cart. So he thought, let me just do that. And what happened is, as soon as he arrived in Jagannath Puri, of course, he just went to Haridas Thakur's ashram, because Haridas Thakur could not enter the temple either. So he stayed with Haridas Thakur, and Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when he saw him, he embraced him. And Sanatana Goswami was mortified. Mortified means it's like death, basically, mort. Yeah. Feeling like, I'd rather die. Because the sores from his body were oozing pus and covering the body, or at least being part of the body of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and he was feeling horrible about it. So, at that point, he didn't reveal his plan to commit suicide. However, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and he had an interesting discussion about Sanatana Goswami's brother, Anupama. Anupama was a great devotee of Lord Ramchandra, and Sanatana Goswami and Rupa Goswami had tried to convince him to stop chanting Sita Ram. Or at least not all the time, chant Hare Krishna instead. And he tried and he couldn't do it, he was crying. And he was very dedicated to Lord Ram, which is actually very good. We find this in Fiji sometimes too. People are very dedicated to Lord Ram, which is fine. There's no problem with that.
Was it like a test to Anupama?
Yes, a test. A test to see if he was actually attached to his Ishtadeva. So, then, anyway, so that's where we left off. And so Lord Chaitanya and Sanatana Goswami were actually glorifying the dedication of Anupama. Anupama passed away sometime before that. Anyway, so let's get to the Caitanya Caritamrta. We're continuing from text 45 of Antya Lila, chapter 4. So, Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda
Jai Shri Dvaita Chandra Jai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda
Jaya Jaya Sri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaur Bhakta Vrinda
Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Govinda
Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaur Bhakta Vrinda
Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Okay, so we're continuing. Text 45. Goshani Kahene Mata Murari Gupta Purvayami Purikshinon Tadaherita. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, there was a similar incident concerning Murari Gupta. Formerly, I examined him, and his determination was similar. Actually, Murari Gupta is considered to be an incarnation of Hanuman in Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes. So Lord Chaitanya tested him, stop chanting Sitaram so much, just chant Hare Krishna. And he just said, I can't do it. I'm attached. And Lord Chaitanya praised him because that was a test. Se Bhaktadanya Yena Chari Prabhura Charana Se Prabhudanya Yena Chare Nija Jana. Glorious is that devotee who does not give up the shelter of his Lord, and glorious is that Lord who does not abandon his servant. Durdaive sevakayhare yayanyastane se takuradanya thare chuledari hane. If by chance a servant falls down and goes somewhere else, glorious is that master who captures him and brings him back by the hair. And that's also in reference to another pastime where Lord Chaitanya was touring South India with his servant Krishnadas, and there were a bunch of these gypsies who lured Krishnadas away, and then Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went to save him, and the gypsies tried to kill Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu used his mystic power to cause the gypsies' weapons to turn on them and kill them. So he actually literally saved this devotee Krishnadas from the gypsies. They actually used like attractive women to lure him away. Gypsies do that sometimes. I don't know if you have gypsies here. No. No, in Europe actually there's quite a few gypsies, and sometimes you find the ladies, they have these really big skirts or dresses, whatever you call it, like this really. And I said, why is it like that? Just like this wide. They're not that heavy.
Yeah.
But they said when they go into a store, they put things in there. Shoplifting. So, but because you don't have that here, everybody in Australia is honest.
Convict society. Rehabilitated.
Yeah, very honest society, no abuse of people. So, Bala Haila Tamara Hihan Haila Gaumane Egare Ratahihan Haridasa Sane. It is very good that you have arrived here, Lord Chaitanya is talking. Now stay in this room with Haridas Thakur. Krishna Bhakti Rase Dunhe Parama Pradana Krishna Rasa Svadana Kara Laha Krishna Nama. Both of you are expert in understanding the mellows of Lord Krishna's devotional service. Therefore, you should both continue relishing the taste for such activities and chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Eta Bali Mahaprabhu Utiya Lila Govinda Dwaraya Dunhe Prasada Pathaila. Having said this, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu got up and left. Uh-oh. Something happened. And through Govinda, he sent prasadam for them to eat. E mata sanatana rahi prabhu stane jagannatera chakradeki karina praname. In this way, Sanatana Goswami stayed under the care of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. he would see the wheel on the pinnacle of the Jagannath temple and offer respectful obeisances. Prabhupada said that, oh, okay, thank you. Prabhupada said that if you can't go into the temple, you can look at the flag or the wheel at the top of the temple and you get the same benefit. So one should not lament that they can't go into the temple. So nowadays, sometimes devotees, they try to, Western devotees, they try to trick and get into the temple. There's one of my godbrothers, Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj. He actually went into the temple and put a shawl over his head. Because he was darker color, he was able to get in. And then he thought, oh, this is really great. And then he thought, let me go in a second time. And then they discovered him. So he had to jump over the wall as they were running after him. So basically, we don't need to force our way into the temple because we have Lord Jagannath here. And, we follow it's important for a devotee to follow the customs, the local customs, even if we disagree with the local customs. Because we don't want to be seen as weird. So, Prabhuvasi Pratidina Milena Dvijane Ishtagosti Krishna Kata Kahe Katakshane. Every day, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would go there to meet these two stalwart devotees and discuss topics of Krishna with them for some time. Divya Prasada Paya Nitya Jagannatha Mandire Taha Ani Nitya Avashadena Adonha Kare. The offerings of prasadam at the temple of Lord Jagannath were the highest quality. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would bring this prasadam and deliver it to the two devotees. So even though they couldn't go in the temple, then Lord Jagannath came out in the form of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and brought them prasadam. That would be even better than going to see Lord Jagannath. Ekadina Asi Prabhu Dunhare. Whoops, a little too far. Milila Sanatane Chambite Kahite Lagila. One day the Lord came to meet them. He suddenly began speaking to Sanatana Goswami. So here, Lord Chaitanya is actually going to deal with Sanatana's plan to commit suicide. Sanatana Deha Tyage Krishna Yade Paye Koti Deha Krishna Ke Tabe Chadite Pariye. My dear Sanatana, he said, if I could attain Krishna by committing suicide, I would certainly give up millions of bodies without a moment's hesitation. Deha Tyage Krishna Na Paye Paye Bhajane Krishna Prapjera Upaya Kona Nahi Bhakti Bane. You should know, sir, that one cannot attain Krishna simply by giving up the body. Krishna is attainable by devotional service. There's no other means for attaining him. Deha Tyagari Yata Sabatamo Dhamma Tamo Rajo Dharme Krishnera Napaye Marma. Acts such as suicide are influenced by the mode of ignorance, and in ignorance and passion, one cannot understand who Krishna is. Bhakti Vida Krishna Kavunahi Premodaya Prema Bina Krishna Prapti Anye Haite Noya. Unless one discharges devotional service, one cannot awaken one's dormant love for Krishna. And there's no means for attaining him other than awakening that dormant love. So here's a Sanskrit. Nasaddayati mam yogo nasankyam dharmahudava naswadhyayastapasjago yatavatir mamojata. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna said, my dear Uddhava, neither through Astanga Yoga, the mystic yoga system for controlling the senses, nor through impersonal monism, or an analytical study of the absolute truth, nor through study of the Vedas, nor through austerities, charity, or acceptance of sannyas, can one satisfy me as much as by developing unalloyed devotional service. Of course, that's from the Bhagavatam 11:40-20. Deyatyagari tambo dharma pataka karana sadaka napaya tate krishnera charana. Measures like suicide are causes for sin. A devotee never achieves shelter at Krishna's lotus feet by such actions. Actually, one commits to suicide, they become ghosts. And they don't have a gross body after that. And they just hover around for a long period of time, so don't do it. Preme bhakta viyoge jahai teha charite preme krishna mile sehana pare marite. Because of feelings of separation from Krishna, an exalted devotee sometimes wants to give up his life. By such ecstatic love, however, one attains the audience of Krishna, and at that time he cannot give up his body. It's a very important point. Gadanura gera viyogananyaya sahana tate anuragi vanche apana marana. One who is deeply in love with Krishna cannot tolerate separation from the Lord. Therefore, such a devotee always desires his own death. It's like a mixed feeling, like he desires to leave this world enjoying the Lord, like in a mood of separation, but at the same time he understands that the Lord is present in his service. The Lord is present in the other devotees. The Lord is present in the deities. So, it's sort of like a mixed emotion there. It's not that he's thinking, let me die, let me die, let me die. Yashangri pankaja raja snapanam mahanto vachanchuma patirivatma tamo pahatjai Yaryambu jaksha nabhaye bhavat prasadam Jayam sunbrata krishan chata janma beshat. O lotus-eyed one, great personalities like Lord Shiva desire to bathe in the dust of your lotus feet to drive away ignorance. If I do not get the mercy of your lordship, I shall observe vows to reduce the duration of my life, and thus I shall give up bodies for hundreds of births if it is possible to get your mercy in that way. This is actually a beautiful verse that was spoken by Rukmini Dev in the Srimad Bhagavatam 10:52-43. She was the daughter of King Bhishmaka and heard about Krishna's transcendental attributes, and thus she desired to get Krishna as her husband. Unfortunately, her elder brother, Rukmi, was envious of Krishna and therefore wanted her to be offered to Shishupal. When Rukmi became aware of this, she was greatly grieved. Thus she wrote Krishna a confidential letter, which was presented and read to him by a Brahmin messenger. This verse appeared in that letter, and of course after that, Krishna made arrangements to kidnap her. And she drove the chariot. Did you know that? She actually drove the chariot, and so Krishna could fight. Krishna had to fight with all the soldiers, and especially with Rukmi, so he couldn't drive the chariot and fight at the same time. So it's interesting, in those days, sometimes people think, the women just stayed in their little kitchens and cooked and rolled rotis all day long. And the man kept saying, more rotis, more rotis.
That's what happens now.
You ever seen that? In Fiji, you've seen that. Rotis! Yeah, so now the women knew how to drive chariots. They knew how to they knew how to fight. Even in the Ramayana, you have Kaikeyi who saved Dasarath. They were in a battle, and Dasarath was knocked unconscious, and she was driving the chariot. And she saved Dasarath. And because of that, Dasarath said, I'm very pleased with you, so whatever you want later on, you get. So you have to be careful about offering benedictions and promises, because you never know how it's going to be used against you. He should have just said, thank you. not ask for benediction. It's a problem. So, sing kanganastwad adaramrita purakena hasavaloka kalagita jastrichayadnim no chedvayam viraha janyupa yuktateha janena yama pariyo padavim sakhete. Oh, dear Krishna, your smiling glances and melodious talk by your smiling glances and melodious talk, you have awakened a fire of lusty desire in our hearts. This is the gopis. Now you should extinguish that fire with a stream of nectar from your lips by kissing us. Kindly do this, otherwise, dear friend, the fire within our hearts will burn our bodies to ashes because of separation from you. Thus, by meditation, we shall claim shelter at your lotus feet. So this is a verse from the Bhagavatam 10:29-35, spoken by the gopis when they were attracted by the vibration of Krishna's flute in the moonlight of autumn. All of them, being maddened, came to Krishna, but to increase their ecstatic love, Krishna gave them moral instructions to return home. The gopis did not care for these instructions. They wanted to be kissed by Krishna, for they had come there with lusty desires to dance with him. Of course, it's not the same as the lusty desires in this world. They wanted to please Krishna by those activities. So when they came to meet Krishna in the forest, the first thing Krishna said was, "What are you doing here? Why are you here in the middle of the night with all these wild animals? Just go home and take care of your babies." And they got really upset with Krishna at that point, and they were ready to leave their bodies. Kubuni charya kara shavana kirtana achirat pavi tabe krishnara charanha. Caitanya Mahaprabhu told Sanatana Goswami, "Give up your nonsensical desires, for they are unfavorable for getting shelter at the lotus feet of Krishna. Engage yourself in chanting and hearing, then you will soon achieve the shelter of Krishna without a doubt. Nitya jati nahi Krishna bhajaneya yoga satkula vipranahe bhajanera yoga." A person born in a low family is not unfit for discharging devotional service to Lord Krishna, nor is one fit for devotional service simply because he was born in an aristocratic family of Brahmins. Ye bhaje se bada obhakta hina chara Krishna bhajane nahi jati kulari vichara. Anyone who takes the devotional service is exalted, whereas a non-devotee is always condemned and abominable. Just be careful when you're dealing with people. Don't call them condemned and abominable. Therefore, the discharge of devotional service to the Lord, there's no consideration of the status of one's family. So one has to be very careful taking these particular quotes out of context. We were talking last night how many times Prabhupada uses the word demon in the Bhagavad Gita. It's quite shocking. And if we just look at people who are not members of the Krishna conscious movement and think, demons, abominable, like here, condemned, abominable, it'll probably be very bad for business if you're doing business. But anyway, but it'll also be very bad for compassion. So what we should do, or how we should see people, is that they are devotees, but they have not recognized the fact yet. They're like people in amnesia, who have amnesia. That's it. And our business is to remind them. So they're all devotees. Their activities, so you can separate that. Their activities may be abominable or condemnable, or their activities may be demoniac activities, but we have to be very careful not to see them as demoniac, not to see them as abominable, karmi demons. It's not like that. Even in Christianity, you have Jesus Christ saying, don't hate the sinner, hate the sinned. So it's a really important point, because we find many immature devotees, they take these quotes out of context and become very divisive in their attitudes towards others. And it's not productive as far as bringing people to Krishna consciousness. And devotees should love everybody, not hate anyone. We don't hate anybody. We may hate activities that someone is doing, like the butcher or something like that, but we don't hate the butcher. The Upanishad says, Yastu sarvani bhutani atma naivanu pashati sarva bhuteshu chatmanam tatona vigigupshate. The one who sees everything in connection with Krishna doesn't hate anyone or anything. So, dinaradi kadaya kare bhagavan kulina pandita dhanira Vada abhimana. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is always favorable to the humble and meek, but aristocrats, learned scholars, and the wealthy are always proud of their positions. Viprandvishad gunanyutad aravindanabha padaravinda mukakat swapachambarishtam manye tadarpitamando vachane hitarta pranam punati sakulam natupurina manaha. One may be born in a Brahmin family and have all 12 Brahminical qualities, but if in spite of being thus qualified, he is not devoted to the lotus feet of Lord Krishna, who has a navel shaped like a lotus, he is not as good as a Chandala, who has dedicated his mind, words, activities, wealth, and life to the service of the Lord. Simply to take birth in a Brahmin family or to have Brahminical qualities is not sufficient. One must be a pure devotee of the Lord. Thus, if a Shwa Pocha or Chandala is a devotee, he delivers not only himself but his entire family as well. Whereas a Brahmin who is not a devotee but simply has Brahminical qualifications cannot even purify himself, what to speak of his family. Pretty heavy statement. That's from the Bhagavatam 7, 9, 10. Bhajanera Madhya Shrestha Navavida Bhakti Krishna Prema Krishna Dite Dare Mahashakti. Among the ways of executing devotional service, the 9 prescribed methods are the best, for these processes have great potency to deliver Krishna and ecstatic love for him. The 9 kinds of devotional services are mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam 7.5.23. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Tasham, Sakyam, Atmanivedanam. These 9 are hearing, chanting, remembering Krishna, offering service to Krishna's lotus feet, offering worship in the temple, offering prayers, working as a servant, making friendship with Krishna, and unreservedly surrendering to him. These 9 processes of devotional service can grant one Krishna an ecstatic love for him. In the beginning, one has to discharge devotional service according to regulated principles, but gradually, as devotional service becomes one's life and soul, one achieves the most exalted position of ecstatic love for Krishna. Ultimately, Krishna is the goal of life. One need not have taken birth in an aristocratic Brahmin family to attain the lotus feet of Krishna, nor is a person born in a low family unfit for achieving Krishna's lotus feet. In the Srimad Bhagavatam 3.33, 7, Devahuti says to Kapiladev, very important verse, Aho bata swapachato garyan yadivagri vartate namatubhyam depustapaste jahu varshashnararya brahmanuchir nama granantiyete. O my Lord, even a person born in a low family of dog-eaters is glorious if he always chants the holy name of the Lord. Such a person has already performed all types of austerities, penances, and Vedic sacrifices, has already bathed in sacred rivers, has already studied the Vedic literature. Thus he has become an exalted personality. Similarly, Kunti Devi says to Lord Krishna, another famous verse, Janmaishvarya Shuta Shribir Edamana Dapuman Naivarhat Yavivatum Vai Akinchana Gocharam. A person who is proud of his birth, opulence, knowledge, and beauty cannot achieve your lotus feet. You are available only to the humble and meek, not to the proud. Bhagavatam 1.8.26. Taramadje Savashreshta Nama Sankirtan Niraparade Nama Lele Paya Prema Tana. Of the 9 processes of devotional service, the most important is to always chant the holy name of the Lord. If one does so, avoiding the 10 kinds of offenses, one very easily obtains the most valuable love of God. Srila Jiva Goswami Prabhu gives the following directions in his Bhakti Sandarbha 270. It's a long Sanskrit verse. All right. Iyam cha kirtanakya bhaktir bhagavato Dravya jati guna kriya pir dina janayika vishapara koruno maiti. Shruti paranadesh vishruti ata eva kalo swabhavata. Evaiti dineshu lokeshu avirpuyatan anayasinaiva tatanyugagata mahasadananam sarvam eva palam dadhana sa kritartayati yataheva tutyaiva kalo bhagavato visheshata atash cha santosho bhavati. Chanting the holy name is the chief means of attaining love of Godhead. This chanting or devotional service does not depend upon any paraphernalia, nor on one's having taken birth in a good family, but by humility and meekness one attracts the attention of Krishna. That is the verdict of all the Vedas. Therefore, if one becomes humble and meek, he can easily attain the lotus feet of Krishna in this age of Kali. That is the fulfillment of all great sacrifices, penances, and austerities, because when one achieves ecstatic love of Godhead, he attains the complete perfection of life. Therefore, whatever one does in executing devotional service must be accompanied by the chanting of the holy name of the Lord. The chanting of the holy name of Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, has been praised by Srila Rupa Goswami in his Namashtaka, verse 1. Nikila Shruti Moli Ratnamala Juti Nirajita Pakara Pankajanta Ayimukta Kulaya Upashamanam Varitastham Harinama Samshrayami. Oh, Harinama, the tips of the toes is a beautiful verse. Of your lotus feet are constantly being worshipped by the glowing radiance emanating from the string of gems known as the Upanishads, the crown jewels of the Vedas. You were eternally adored by liberated souls such as Narada and Shukadev. O Harinam, I take complete shelter of you. Similarly, Sri Caitanya Srila Sanatana Goswami has praised the chanting of the holy name as follows in his Brihad Bhagavatamrita 119. Jayati Jayati Namananda Rupam Murare Viramita Nija Dharma Jhana Pujari Natnam Katam Api Sakridatam Mukti Dam Praninam Yat Paramam Amritam Ekam Jivanam Bhushanam Me. All glories to the all blissful holy name of Krishna, which causes the devotee to give up all conventional religious duties, meditation, and worship when somehow or other uttered even once by a living entity. The holy name awards him liberation. The holy name of Krishna is the highest nectar. It is my very life and my only treasure. In the Srimad Bhagavatam 2:111, Shukadev Goswami says, the important verse, Nirvidyamananam Ichatam Akuto Vayam Yoginam Nripa Nrinditam Harer Nanu Nukirtanam. O King, constant chanting of the holy name of the Lord after the waves of the great authorities is the doubtless and fearless way of success for all, including those who are free from all material desires, those who are desirous of material enjoyment, and those who are self-satisfied by dint of transcendental knowledge. In the Srimad Bhagavatam 6.3.22, Yamaraj says, here's Yamaraj speaking, Etavane kalokesmen pumsam dharma parasmitaha mukti yogo bhagavati tannama grahandhadivihi. Devotional service beginning with the chanting of the holy name of the Lord is the ultimate religious principle for the living entity in human society. Similarly, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has said in his Shikshashtaka 3, Trinadapi su nichena tarari vasishana manina manadena kirtiriya sadari. One should chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than the straw of the street. One should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and ready to offer all respect to others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. Regarding the 10 offenses in chanting the holy name, one may refer to Adi Lila, chapter 8, verse 24. So we end here with the text 72 was the last text. Now we can take some questions. Does anyone here have any questions that we'll take from our internet audience? Any questions?
Yes, Gurudev.
Yeah.
During my book distribution, I was giving a book to somebody, and he actually asked a question, Gurudev, and I didn't have the answer for it. I'm just repeating the question. So this is in relation to the Varnashrama Dharma,
Right.
Brahmacharis and Grihastha. So he said that only in Grihastha you cannot, successfully perform devotional service. Either you should be a Brahmachari or you should be a sannyasi and you should renounce because there is a lot of material contamination. I tried to answer him, but I don't have the answer, Gurudev, so help me.
Okay, that's actually very good. First of all, let's talk about. Let me just change the video here. I always have the video on you. So, So first of all, let's give some examples of great devotees who were grahastas. You have Ramananda Roy. You have Shivananda Sain. I mean, practically most of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's associates were grahastas. Yeah, what to speak of Advaitacharya. I mean, wow. So just to say that those particular devotees could make any spiritual advancement is actually an offense against those devotees. Secondly, the point is that if one understands everything, what is that? Ishavashamidam savam jatkinja jagajan jagat tenajena punjada margudhad kashasvidanam. Everything is owned and controlled by the Lord, then one can use anything in the Lord's service. Because if you take that particular stance, this particular philosophical stance, then only if you're basically living a poverty-stricken life can you actually become a devotee, or if you don't have any possessions, because a possession you may get attached to, just like I have a computer here, so I can't be a devotee or I can't execute devotional service because I have a computer. I have a car too, which I'm attached to, but I have all sorts of, paraphernalia. I have a guitar, and so the point is, if I see all these different aspects, of my paraphernalia, as being owned by Krishna, meant for his pleasure, that's called yukta vairagya. In other words, I'm accepting things and using those things for Krishna. So the same thing in the grahastha ashram. If one has a wife, one has children, and you engage them in devotional service, then you're actually engaged in yukta vairagya. You're not engaged in sense gratification. And naturally, people have to have some natural affection in this world too. Like even Shivananda Sain had a dog and he was attached to the dog, So having affection for someone else does not mitigate against advancing in devotional service. But the affection should... Is it confirmed? Yeah. The effect... All right. So the affection should be... He knew we were talking about him. So the affection should be based on really caring for the other person. If in grahastha life or in any other life we are using someone else for our own sense gratification, then certainly you can't make any any spiritual advancement. That's called grihamedi life. Grihamedi refers to like a bull that's tied up by his nose and led around in a circle. So if we're using anyone for our sense gratification, then our spiritual life becomes nullified, basically, or stopped at that particular point. So manasadeha geha yokishimor arpilam yutuya pade nandakishore. As Bhaktivinoda Thakur prays, my mind, my body, my home, everything is yours, O Nanda Kishore. So if you realize that, there's no impediment. But if you're a sannyasi attached to his computer, then there's an impediment. So the point is the attachment for sense gratification. That's the impediment, not the ashram that you're in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%.
How can you say such a thing? So many, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, our great acharya, was a householder. I mean, Lord Brahma, the first person, Lord Brahma was not a brahmachari. His wife's name was Saraswati, actually.
Yeah.
It's expansion of Lord Vishnu's Saraswati. So, his wife's name was Saraswati. So he was married. Vyasadeva was married. Narada Muni was not. But, you have about a lot of the members of our disciplic succession were in the Grihastha ashram. They're serving. That's all. They're dedicating their lives and training their children up in Krishna consciousness. Just like we see some of the children here. Like Kana, he's very Krishna conscious, right? Anyway, so this simply seeing things externally according to the body. Everybody has different responsibilities. Someone has the responsibility of a family, another person has the responsibility of disciples. I mean, I have so many disciples, so if I get attached to them for sense gratification and what they can do for me, say, oh, so many nice disciples. They're cooking so nicely, giving me so many nice donations, and then one's engaged in sense gratification. One can't make, even a sannyasi, guru can't make spiritual advancement in that case. But if you see your wife as Krishna's servant, and you assist your wife, or you help your wife become Krishna conscious, or the wife helps the husband become Krishna conscious, then that's very good. Actually, just one funny story. I can't help myself. So anyway, in Tukaram's situation, his wife helped him become Krishna conscious because she opposes.
Yeah.
She made his life miserable. I'm not saying that every wife should do that to her husband. So anyway, any other questions? Questions from the devotees here? And then we can take questions from the devotees online.
I just had a question as well, Gurudev.
Okay.
Just in relation to what we were talking about, you were talking earlier about in the, how, and I'm not, qualified to comment on devotees of Lord Jagannath, but it strikes me that devotees aren't allowed, Western devotees or devotees from a different background aren't allowed to enter into the temple. And when Lord Chaitanya himself came out, as we know, and greeted Haridas Thakur and everything,
right,
and all the Shastric evidence is there, and these are devotees of Lord Jagannath. And how can they be concerned about the bodily concept?
That's a good question. We don't want to offend anyone, obviously, but before we become pure devotees, we have many attachments, cultural attachments, ways. There's just different things. Like people from Fiji, they like certain types of food, for example. Here's an example that's going to aggravate everybody. I mean, you all like your rotis in the morning, right? It's an attachment. You should surrender and just follow my diet. No. No, you can't. You can't because you're conditioned to a certain extent. And it's very hard to give up that conditioning that one has had since one's very birth. So, just like in Bengal, if people don't eat rice, it's like fasting. You can give them anything else, but if they don't get rice, they're fasting. And they'll feel weak. So that's conditioning. So before one's a pure devotee, one is conditioned in certain ways. And it's very hard to give up that condition. And we have to be empathic with people who are conditioned, who have certain biases in certain ways. I mean, what can you say? I mean, people have certain biases and conditioning. I experienced that. You're talking about diet again. I experienced that in my own diet. Years ago, I was eating not a lot of rotis, but I was taking a lot of paneer and stuff like that. Some cheese and paneer. And, I was conditioned by it. So it was very hard. I just prayed to the Lord, let me give up that conditioning or habit. It was more addiction, to be honest. And then, anyway, so to make a long story short, Lord Shiva gave me some mercy, and I was able to give it up like that. And I'm not attached to it anymore. But it's very hard. It's like an addiction. Things you've been doing since your very birth, ways of looking at the world, right? It's a conditioning. So they're conditioned in that way, and we have to just be empathic with them. That's what they were trained, or how they were trained. And if you confront people too heavily and ask them to renounce that conditioning without the proper purification process, it's not going to work. They're just going to become bitter and angry, and that's what's happened. So, there's traditions. So many traditions. I mean, like all right, here's another thing in Fiji. You have this tradition, like the Pitrapaksh and Devapaksh, which is not really there in the Vedic literatures. It's something, a tradition, but I've never been able to get people to give it up. They just have to do it.
It's a controversial topic, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, they just have to do it. And I'm not going to condemn. In the beginning, I would tease people about it. But now I understand, being a little bit more empathic than I was in the early days, that people are conditioned in a certain way. We just have to allow people to progress according to their own speed in devotional service. And so I'm not going to condemn those pujaris. They just don't know better. It's how they're trained. It's what their mother and father. It's actually connected with their relationship with their mother and father, because you're talking about these Brahminical families, and the family ties are very tight. And what your father taught you is really important. Going back to the Ramayana, like Dasarath told, we didn't tell, but he conveyed the information that Lord Ram should go to the forest through Kaikeyi, and Ram was just obedient. Me being born in the Western world, I can't understand that at all. I would tell my father, forget it. If you want me to go to the forest, buy me a camper, a cabin, a camper in my, going to the forest? What the hell are you talking about? But from the different culture, it's like, your father said it. Yes, Dad. I told a joke the other day that I asked one devotee, I said, if your father's told you to go to the forest, would you go? And he said, for 14 years. And he said, yes, but I wouldn't take my wife. That's funny. All right, maybe we just take one question from the online Prabhus. Gopal has a question. I think I have to give him permission to unmute himself. Hold on a second. All right, Gopal, you can unmute yourself now. What's the question?
Lucrative.
Haribol.
So you were talking about suicide. Lord Chaitanya was explaining why suicide will not get the desired result for Srila Sanatana Goswami. In today's modern world, especially from the medical point of view, suicidal ideation is considered a mental illness.
That's right.
So it seems unfair that if someone succumbs to a mental illness, that they're punished for that. Just like if someone succumbs to cancer, in spite of, trying their best to overcome it, if someone succumbs to suicidal ideation, why do they get the punishment of having to be a ghost?
All right, that's actually a good question. The point is, the reason one gets in that mood of suicidal ideation, so in the Vedic perspective, you have the three modes of nature: goodness, passion, and ignorance. And you've actually chosen to associate with the mode of ignorance, and you have some personal responsibility in that. I mean, also, if someone is drinking and dies under the influence of alcohol, he becomes a ghost. So it's a question of the consciousness being in the mode of ignorance. And so, we can't just analyze everything psychologically and then just get to the point of, lust, anger, greed, which Krishna describes as the three gates going to hell. We can't just analyze them from a psychological, modernistic viewpoint. People do have personal responsibility for things. Just like someone will say, I hit you because I'm an angry person. We talk about this denial of responsibility for one's actions. So one is ultimately responsible. I mean, of course, I feel very compassionate for someone who does or has this suicidal ideation, but at the same time, one is responsible for one's activities. Yeah, we can't deny that. And unless people are brain damaged, there's certain times there's extenuating circumstances. Like if someone is brain damaged, autistic or something, doesn't have the ability to discriminate, then that person would not be considered so responsible. But as long as one has the ability to judge things. I know it appears very harsh, but we're not simply only advocates of modern psychology here. So, and also, everybody's dealt with by Yamaraj as an individual case. Obviously, it's not just one size fits all. So everybody's an individual case. So if there's some extenuating circumstances, they may not have to become a ghost if they commit suicide, because Yamaraj is aware of the extenuating circumstances. That's, just like if you're fighting for Krishna and the army captures you and they want you to spy or tell all the information about your army, and you take a arsenic or a pill or something like that to kill yourself, then that's extenuating circumstance. So there are extenuating circumstances. Or if someone is under so much pressure they can't bear with it anymore, that's an extenuating circumstance. Okay. I think it's time for prasadam. He just gave me the message. So we want to thank everybody for joining us. We had a few people here. All right. Thank you. We'll see everybody tomorrow, same time, same station.
Always be here. Now in person.
We're here, actually, for those of you who don't know, we are here in Australia, the Sydney area, and you can see some of the people.
Hey, Krishna.
Anyway, you can see everybody. And